This edition of Monocle on Saturday was first broadcast on the 5th of July 2025 on Monocle Radio. I'm Georgina Godwin, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. This is Monocle on Saturday. On today's programme, we'll have a look through the week's news and culture with the international journalist and founder of China Dialogue, Isabel Hilton. Then
we actually have one physical location where everything happens, which allows us to create that real kind of traditional festival feeling.
Jenny Niven, the director of the Edinburgh International Book Festival, with details of the delights the event will bring in August. And we'll explore a publishing house which focuses on overlooked 20th century literature. That's all ahead here on Monocle on Saturday with me, Georgina Godwin. First though, here's the news. Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky spoke on Friday about boosting US arms deliveries to Ukraine as Russian missile and drone attacks escalated across multiple cities. The White House says discussions focused on defensive systems, but no new aid package has yet been confirmed. The European Union is accelerating plans to secure vital mineral reserves, fearing supply disruptions from China and Russia. According to reports today, the EU aims to reduce its reliance on politically sensitive sources for critical raw materials. Israeli forces killed at least 15 people in Gaza on Friday in renewed strikes targeting what the military called militant infrastructure. The violence comes as Donald Trump waits for a formal response from Hamas to his proposed ceasefire plan. And authorities in the UAE Emirate of Fujairah have installed musical rumble strips on a highway that play Beethoven's Ode to Joy when cars pass over them at exactly the speed limit. Officials say the aim is to promote safer driving, though some motorists now say it's the only stretch of road where they're happy to slow down. And that's your Monocle Radio News. Hello and welcome to Monocle on Saturday. I'm Georgina Godwin and I'm joined in the studio by Isabel Hilton, international journalist and founder of China Dialogue. Good morning to you, Isabel.
Good morning, Georgina.
Now, it's been glorious weather all week, but not today.
Well, in London?
In London.
In London, it's cooler, which I welcome. I came back to a heat wave in London from a very, very pleasant 9 days sailing in the Outer Hebrides, where the weather was, shall we say, Scottish. So it was woolly hats and rain gear, and absolutely beautiful. And I came back to sweltering London, where we're just not equipped for heat, I'm afraid. And certainly my house isn't equipped for heat.
Yeah, the
tube isn't equipped for heat. It's miserable.
Yeah. I was in Paris last weekend, and where I was staying, of course, there's absolutely no aircon, not even a fan. It was all very, very hot. Today, though, in London, it's overcast. A bit sad. I live in a cooperative, and today it's 50 years old, and we're having a party in the shared garden to commemorate it. And, of course, it's going to be a bit of a washout.
Well, it may not rain.
It may not rain. But of course, this leads us to climate change, doesn't it? Because that's why we're seeing these extremes of weather and actually taking a broad sweep across it. Texas flood disasters, there's this heat wave in Europe, fires. I mean, Greece is Crete particularly just burning. Let's have a closer look at this because the attack on climate policies is building.
It's extraordinary because, it's almost becoming, this is what, the third or fourth summer, certainly in Europe, where we've had really extreme weather and fires, where people die. These temperatures are too high, not just for comfort, not just for convenience, but actually for human health, particularly among the elderly. And if you ever wanted more evidence of climate change, really it's all around you. The sea temperature of the Mediterranean is many degrees above normal. That's going to be terrible for ocean life. Yet at the same time, and as we have this disaster in Texas, it happened on the day that Trump's major budget bill, which is part of an attack on the institutions, amongst others, of course, but on the institutions that monitor climate change, the institutions that rescue people in extreme situations, the institutions that make attributions. So when there is, as there was in Texas, this extraordinary sudden flash flood, which killed, as far as we know, 23 people, but many more are missing, It makes the connection with climate change, and all of that is being dismantled. Meanwhile, in Europe, the far-right parties are talking about the climate religion and dismantling it. So you have far-right parties in France which aim to take apart the European Green Deal, which is one of the most progressive bits of climate legislation in the world. In Hungary, they've raged a long campaign against it. Here in the UK, Nigel Farage's Reform Party threatens to undo climate legislation if he gets into power at all. So everywhere we see parties trying to destroy the efforts to prevent further catastrophe. It's absolutely extraordinary.
Just having a closer look at Texas, I see it now updated to 24 dead, and one of the sort of groups of people were some girls at a Christian summer camp.
Yes,
teenage girls. I mean, you send your kid away for a summer camp. This is the last thing.
Yes, and the summer camp was on the banks of the river that flooded, but this wasn't a foolishly located summer camp in normal circumstances. It's the Guadalupe River in Texas, and that camp has been going for nearly 100 years in the same family, and so it's not that something new has happened in the wrong place. It's that all the things that we do have become unsafe because of climate change, and this is a really tragic example of it. There were 750 girls at that camp this week, Christian families, and a great many of them are missing. So the speed at which the water rose was absolutely staggering in the middle of the night, and the emergency services were mobilised, but it all happens very quickly, and I'm afraid we're just going to see many more of these awful situations. Meanwhile, I don't think Donald Trump has said a word about it, but there was video of him dancing in celebration of the passage of his monster bill.
Quite extraordinary. And in Crete, of course, 5,000 people have evacuated because of the fires there. 230 firefighters, 46 fire service vehicles and helicopters battling it. It's just, I mean, here you have this huge tourist destination, and that's their summer season.
Yes, but again, this is not the first summer that it's happened. And what's extraordinary is that any one of these events would have been major headline news 10 years ago, and they're fading into the background now. I mean, they are catastrophes for the people who experience them, but our attention is elsewhere. It's on Gaza or other conflicts. It's on politics, and we're really not looking at it. So the science is more and more alarmed, the evidence is more and more clear, and the attention is fading. It's quite extraordinary.
There are some places, though, which are trying to make a positive difference. I see that Cannes is the latest city to restrict large cruise ships.
Yes, I do enjoy the restrictions on large cruise ships. My only visit to Australia, when I went to Sydney, I couldn't see the harbour bridge because there was an absolutely enormous and hideous cruise ship in front of it. But this is also part of a trend, and it's part of an anti-tourism trend, actually. Very desirable destinations, certainly across Europe, are saying we've had enough of this, because the numbers of tourists who arrive are simply extraordinary, and they overwhelm the city. They make life miserable for the people who live there. So there's a tug. Traditionally cities have encouraged tourism because of the revenues, but it's got to the point where for quite substantial parts of the year these cities are unlivable. Then you get vulnerable cities like Venice. So you get a cruise ship in Venice and you practically flood the city. So they have been told for some time now not to park near the city. But Cannes is a new one. It's banning cruise ships that carry more than 1,000 people from the harbour. It's about the aesthetics, it's about the numbers. It's also about the pollution, because these cruise ships are very dirty. And that's why, for example, Norway banned cruise ships 2 years ago from the fjords because, they were simply driving a coach and horses through Norway's attempts to clean up the environment. So there are really now a number of places. Greece also, in 2023, announced restrictions on cruise ships in Santorini, which was, again, a popular destination. And they limit daily cruise ship passenger arrivals to 8,000 people a day, which is still a lot. But the previous peak was 17,000 people a day.
Extraordinary. And of course, what happens is the cruise ship docks, and then you have this huge flood of people who clog up the streets and spend almost nothing. They're buying cheap tat if they're buying anything at all.
And then they go back on board to eat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. And curiously enough, on the Hebridean trip, we came across an enormous dock, which had specially been built to accommodate cruise ships, because cruise ships are also going to northern destinations, partly because of climate change. And it was just huge. And again, the local tax, this was on the island of Harris. Cruise ships which could practically double the population of Harris on arrival, and they were planning for one a week. So the taxi drivers were very excited, because there weren't many taxis in Harris, but everybody else was rather dreading it. We were spared the arrival of a cruise ship because there was an outbreak of COVID on board, so they were told not to come.
It's not funny. It's not funny. And of course, Venice was particularly upset this last weekend because of the Bezos wedding.
Well, yes, the people of Venice definitively expressed their views on. I guess, you're living in a city which has been vulnerable for decades. I mean, that saving Venice has been a kind of major project, which I think is probably doomed because of climate change. Venice was sinking. That was, even before the sea started to rise, Venice had started to sink. So for 40 years, saving Venice has been a project. And I think that the vulnerability of the city, the fact that it's so easily and quickly overwhelmed through the summer season, and on top of that, the world's most privileged and richest people jetting in, just to use it as a backdrop for a party, I think the good citizens had enough.
I've only been on a cruise ship once, and it was a very small one. It was on the Nile, and that was, it was fascinating. But I am about to go on a cruise ship, though, I have to confess, but it's not going to stop anywhere. It's transatlantic. It's the Queen Mary 2.
Good heavens.
And it sails from New York to Southampton. And what it is, it's a literary festival at sea.
How wonderful. I did actually once cross the Atlantic on a ship, but it was for transport purposes. I had a scholarship between school and university many years ago, and they shipped us rather than flew us to the States. So I did exactly that journey in reverse, sailing into New York Harbour with the Statue of Liberty at 7 a.m. It was rather wonderful.
Yeah. I'm told that's the destination, that's the way to do it.
Arriving in Southampton is slightly less picturesque, I fear. Sorry.
And also it's December. I'm told that the weather isn't great either, but I'll just be kind of sitting there talking about books most of the time.
Do you get seasick?
I don't know. I haven't been on the sea enough to know.
It was quite lively when I did it.
Yeah.
I don't, fortunately, get seasick, but a lot of people did. So you might want to stock up with some pills.
Oh, dear. Is there any way you can practice in advance for sort of being seasick?
You could try going on, I don't know, a small yacht somewhere off the Isle of Wight might give you an indication as to whether you're likely to get seasick. Because if you are, there is some quite effective medication these days.
The last time I was on a yacht many years ago, I fell down the hatch, and I've been
That's a different hazard.
Yes. Okay, well, so perhaps I shouldn't be so excited about this literary
it'll be wonderful. I'm just wondering, want you to enjoy it.
But there is another literary festival that is coming up much sooner than that, and that is the Edinburgh International Book Festival. Now, I know that we'll both be there. What are you doing there?
I'm going to do 2 China-related events, which I'm very much looking forward to. One discussion on geopolitics and one China-related book, which is actually about the life of, or the year that Wallace Simpson spent in China, well before she married the then Prince of Wales. But yes.
How interesting. Well, let's hear from Jenny Niven. She's the director of Edinburgh International Book Festival, and she came in for a chat a few days ago. In the month of August, Edinburgh comes alive with the festival. There are so many different elements to it, but the one that we are primarily interested in today is the Book Festival, which takes place from the 9th to the 24th of August at the wonderful Edinburgh Futures Institute. There are over 600 events featuring almost 700 authors from over 35 countries. It's an incredibly brilliant and ambitious programme. And here to talk to me about it is the director, Jenny Niven. Jenny, welcome.
Thank you, Georgina. Thanks for having me.
Now, I've just been at your launch event and you went through some of these 600 sessions that we'll have access to. But most of them are around the theme of repair. Tell us about that.
That's right. I think for me, the idea of being able to have long-form, nuanced, interesting conversation should be a bit of an act of hope, an act of resilience, something that propels the conversation forward. And while we could diagnose everything that is wrong and everything that is broken right now, I would also like the work that we are doing to perhaps suggest some ways that might be hopeful and how we can repair things. So we're using the idea of repair just really as a framing to look at all sorts of different issues across the political sphere, mental health and well-being, the environment and sustainability is a huge part of that, and our relationship to the natural world, and social cohesion. So it's a useful kind of baggy, expansive sort of idea that allows us to do a lot of interesting, thought-provoking discussion under that.
For listeners who haven't been to Edinburgh, can you just position it in the kind of global landscape of literary events?
It's 43 years old, I think, this year. So it's one of the older ones. It ran every second year for its first 10 years or so of existence and now runs annually. Crucially, it runs right in the middle of all of the Edinburgh festivals, of which there are 9 concurrently in August. So the International Festival, Jazz and Blues, Comedy, TV, Film. So it's really very much of its context, and I think that's really important. It's quite different from if there's so many beautiful destination festivals, but we're a little bit different because of everything else that's happening. But we are, at one time we were the biggest. I don't know what metrics are important to people. I don't think that's necessarily specifically the most interesting thing about Edinburgh, but we do still have, as you say, 700 writers that are coming to us. 35 countries, I think, writers are coming from. And last year, in our streaming and the amount of work that we put online that then goes out around the world, I think we reached 65 countries through that work as well. So the reach is pretty extensive.
That's extraordinary. I was listening to the local MP for the area in which the festival is held, and he was talking about numbers and comparing it to the Paris Olympics. I thought it was fascinating.
That's right. And myself and a few of the other directors of the Edinburgh festivals, we're part of something called Festivals Edinburgh, and we are continually making the case that our festivals should have mega event status and be treated in that way, because it's true, more people come to the Edinburgh festivals, plural, every year than go to an Olympics, and yet those events, which are not cultural specifically, primarily, are supported with lots of different sort of infrastructural help and background that our events are not.
And they only happen every 4 years.
Exactly, and we're doing it every single year. But of course that has an impact on the city and on the local economy, both positive and negative in terms of, pressure on services. So we need that support and that infrastructure to really be able to make the most of what should be and is one of the world's leading festival cities.
So, of course, if people go to the book festival, they can then be dipping in and out of the film festival, the comedy festival, the fringe festival. I mean, it's just such a packed cultural time. But your programme itself is incredibly rich. Brilliant fiction, new world orders, lots of information, how to live a meaningful life. I love the idea of that. Tell us about the front list.
Sure. So the other thing that I think is distinctive about us too is that we actually have one physical location where everything happens, which allows us to create that real kind of traditional festival feeling of having tents and having a Spiegel tent and being kind of a captive audience in a way, even in amongst all that hustle and bustle. So most of the events that we run take place at the Edinburgh Futures Institute, which has really great very accessible, kind of well-teched interior spaces, but also courtyard space that allows us to have tents and things. And right next to our venue is the beautiful McEwen Hall, which is part of the Edinburgh University real estate, and it's beautiful. It's where they have all the graduations at the end of the university year, seat 1,000 people. And we're partnering with Underbelly because typically they use that as a fringe venue and they run that venue, but we're working in partnership with them to run 15 really large-scale events every day during our festival, one every day for the 15 days. And so far, so that our writers in that list are amazing. We have Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, we have Ta-Nehisi Coates, we have Anne Applebaum and Edward Wong, who are reporting from the front lines of the American Trump administration, which is a fascinating topic right now. Nicola Sturgeon will be launching her political memoir that day in the middle of the festival. Ian McEwan, it's one of those programmes that you're like, oh, Ian McEwan is one of the leading lights of UK fiction. So it's really terrific. But critically, it's also bringing in really a new audience for the book festival. So superstar footballer Ali McCoist is in there as well. His book is about being on the road with a tartan army, and everybody in Scotland knows who Super Ali is. And also Ruth Jones, who wrote the Gavin and Stacey series as well. So, and we can see from our ticket buying patterns already, because that programme's been out for a couple of months already, that it's bringing new audiences who read all the time but don't necessarily come to book events, and that's a really vital part of what we're trying to do.
That's really interesting. Unpack your demographics a little bit for me.
It's really shifting, and it's very difficult because pre-COVID, during COVID and now post, because the festival has been through so much change, but because people's behaviour around cultural events has changed so much, we don't really have very good ticketing data, and because we're a cultural organisation and there's so much work to do, we're actually updating all of our infrastructure and our back-end stuff to be able to do a much better job, I think, of monitoring that and understanding it better. Typically, as you'll know, lots of UK literature festival audiences are maybe white, they're middle class, they're older, but actually that's not necessarily who's reading. So we're doing a lot of work, and our audience typically has been really quite diverse and has a lot maybe of more younger people because we're in a university city. There is that, and that mix of people who's in the city in August, but there's loads more that we could be doing, and vitally as part of that is young adults and children as well. So with the decline in literacy rates, we're really keen to foster that engagement with books as a community and cultural activity from the ground up. So we've got a whole new strand of work for young adults as well, which also reflects a really interesting shift in publishing for that demographic too.
Absolutely. Now, the festival was run for many years by Nick Biley, who's now moved on. So you're relatively new to this job. How are you finding it?
Well, I mean, I've met you at festivals around the globe, Georgina. I've been in festival land for a while. I directed a book festival in Beijing for many years, for 6 years, and then I was at the Melbourne Writers' Festival and the Wheeler Centre for Books, Writing and Ideas in Melbourne. I was head of literature at Creative Scotland at the Scottish Arts Council for a period of time. So I've been in this space a long time, but the privilege of working in Edinburgh, I'm from Scotland, I'm from the West Coast though, controversial to hire somebody in the East Coast of Scotland. But the privilege and the beauty of it, I think, is the scale. You can do really interesting things when you've got that huge canvas to work on. And I'm really interested in cross-art form stuff and how the written word then gives space and grows into so many other things. So being able to work in collaboration with those other projects and art forms is really terrific. But it's no small challenge. It's a big festival. We're working in quite a difficult cultural context on lots of different fronts. Funding is really challenging. So yeah, so it's been, I wouldn't say a baptism of fire, but it's been a lively first couple of years.
I'm really, really looking forward to it. So listeners can join you either online or in person from the 9th to the 24th of August, and it will be an absolutely buzzing book festival to remember. Jenny Niven, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And of course, as we were saying, Isabel, we will both be there at different times. Now, when you think of Scotland and you think of their sort of, I suppose, their major exports, haggis, but whiskey.
The breeding season at the moment.
Whiskey is the thing, really, isn't it? Scottish whiskey is.
Yes, that's huge.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I suppose that the same. Well, for France, it would be wine, but it would also be cognac.
It would. Yeah.
And China is now getting very cross about French cognac. What's going on about that?
Well, this is part of the other ongoing trade war and countervailing duties, really. Wang Yi, the extremely powerful Chinese foreign minister, and Chinese foreign ministers aren't always powerful, but he's also a Politburo Standing Committee member. So he is a very, very, very big figure indeed. And he's visiting Europe this week. And China chose to announce at this point that they were imposing duties on French brandy. They were going to exempt some brands of cognac, provided they were very high priced. So it's the cheaper brands that they're imposing duties on. Now, why are they doing this? Well, they're doing this because the European Union, a couple of years back, became alarmed at the flood of quite high-level technologies coming into Europe from China and threatening European industry. And this was particularly focused on electric vehicles because China has invested very heavily in all transition technologies and now pretty much dominates the industrial field. And the problem is that they produce them cheaply. They have been subsidised in the past. There's then this kind of ferocious competition where half of the companies go bankrupt. And those that are left standing, as it were, are extremely efficient and you know, they produce vehicles at a third less than a European can. And this threatens European industry in a major way, particularly in Germany, but also in France. So the European Union had an investigation of Chinese subsidies and concluded that these imports deserved a tariff to offset the subsidies. China was very cross, and China then started looking at things from Europe that it could put a tariff on and things that would hurt European sensibilities. So they quite cleverly picked for each country some iconic export that would matter to the government. And in France, it was cognac. So they launched an investigation, in quotes, into subsidies for French cognac and concluded that it was terribly unfair to the Chinese brandy industry. You may be surprised to know there is a Chinese brandy industry. It was certainly new to me. And in order to protect this Chinese brandy industry, they had from unfair competition. So it's all part of a much wider negotiation. And indeed of the problem of the Chinese mode of production in an open economy. So, you know, you have Europe, which has embraced free trade and open economies and WTO, and then you have China, now this industrial behemoth, which produces to very, very different rules and with different results. And this is actually a crisis within the WTO. It's a crisis everywhere. It's partly the crisis to which Trump was responding with his tariffs, though most people think that's the wrong response. But certainly there is a crisis in global trade, and this is just the latest shot.
And of course, one of the unintended consequences is that it becomes a criminal enterprise, and there's a lot of smuggling going on and everything. Indeed, it just kind of goes into into the underworld. Now, the queen of the underworld is Persephone, of course, famous in Greek mythology. And I want to talk about a new, it's not new actually, but a very exciting publishing enterprise called Persephone Books. Now, Francesca Beauman is the managing director and joins me on the line now. Francesca, hello.
Hello.
Do tell us about the mission and philosophy behind Persephone Books.
Well, Persephone Books reprints neglected fiction and non-fiction. Any writers who haven't had the attention they deserve, we bring them back into the light, just like the goddess Persephone came back into the light. Mostly women, because they tended to be the authors who got neglected, but we do publish a few lucky men as well. And mostly from the interwar period, for all sorts of reasons, but particularly because there was such an extraordinary flowering of wonderful women's writing then. We've just published our 152nd book. We've been going 25 years.
And how do you curate your list and balance the different genres, like sort of fiction or memoir or essays?
Well, we find our books in all sorts of ways, but they're all united by the idea of the home, what we call domestic feminism. So an attention to the idea in them of what do you cook and how do you raise your children and what does your home look like and what's your life like sitting at at home. They all have a very strong plot, great characterization, very, very readable, mostly fiction, but yes, a few gardening books, cookery books, memoirs and biographies as well. The most important thing, certainly in this day and age of the algorithm, is that all of us at Persephone Books have to really, really love the book. Because in this day and age, if we don't really love the book, if we're not able to press it into your hand and say, Georgina, I know you're going to adore this, then where are we?
You've also got a really strong visual identity.
We do. Our books are very distinctive. They all are in these very elegant grey covers. With a patterned end paper and a matching bookmark. Now, all the end papers are taken from a textile or fabric designed the same year the book was written, and that somehow thematically evokes what the book's about. Therefore, these books are very beautiful to hold, very tactile. They're even wipe clean. If you spill your cup of tea on the outside of a Persephone book, it doesn't matter at all. They're printed in Germany by our wonderful printers, two German women called Heike and Bettina and their team, who are sort of my favourite people in the world, because they're tricky books to print, but we think entirely worth it.
And finally, Francesca, tell us about your latest release, Crooked Cross.
Our latest book, Crooked Cross by Sally Carson, is a lost masterpiece, really, from 1934, when it was first published. It's a novel about a young woman's political and emotional awakening in Nazi Germany. But what's so extraordinary about it is it was written contemporaneously. Sally Carson wrote it whilst living in Bavaria, visiting friends in 1932 to 1933. And so it's incredibly vivid. Like she had a crystal ball and knew what was the horrors that were going to ensue. It's also an incredibly rare female perspective on what was going on at the time. The story opens on Christmas Eve, 1932. In a small Bavarian market town. We see a family, Herr and Frau Kluger and their 3 children. And then the novel tracks in devastating detail over the next 6 months through 1933 as everything really quickly falls apart, as the young men in the town in particular turn towards the country's authoritarian government. It offers incredible insight into how that happened.
And if people want to read that book, of course, they can just buy it from you as a one-off, but you also offer subscriptions and curated bundles.
We do. I mean, what's been wonderful about Crooked Cross, it's become an extraordinary bestseller for us. It's really resonated with lots of people. But yes, we have a 6-month book subscription or a 12-month book subscription where either you can choose the books yourself, but what's really popular is for Persephone to curate the books we send for us and for you. And so that, really opens up a whole new world of reading all these books that people perhaps didn't know existed, but really have stood the test of time, have endured, didn't deserve to fall out of print, and therefore to bring them back and make them available again is really fun.
Francesca, thank you very much indeed. That's Francesca Beauman from Persephone Books. Well, I'm still with Isabel Hilton here in the studio. Isabel, do you have a favourite book that's perhaps out of print?
Apart from my own.
I can't believe for a minute you're out of print.
Alas, I am, yes. And actually, it's a book, if I may for a moment, it's a book that's about to become extremely relevant again. It's called The Search for the Panchen Lama. And it's a Sino-Tibetan religious politics book. It's about the controversy about the identification of the reincarnation of the second most powerful figure in Tibetan Buddhism. And the Dalai Lama this week announced that he would reincarnate. Beijing is furious with him, that when he dies, he will come back outside China and continue his work for the people of Tibet. So there is about to be another massive confrontation over reincarnation.
Do you know, I wonder if you'd explain something for me, because as we were doing this story, I was looking into the Panchen Lama and seeing that the last time that the Dalai Lama chose somebody, a small child, in China, he and his whole family were disappeared.
Yes, and they were disappeared. It's a complicated story, but essentially the search was conducted by the Panchen Lama's monastery, as it should be. But the abbot of that monastery was a devout Buddhist, of course, and he did not feel that he had the authority to make the final choice. So he smuggled the information into India so the Dalai Lama could look at the candidates and confirm or choose another boy. In fact, they agreed on the choice, and the message was secretly smuggled back with the intention that the abbot would make the announcement. But then the Chinese insisted that there should be a lottery from an object called the Golden Urn, which was ordered up by Qing dynasty, a Manchu emperor, to be used in case of disputes. And the Tibetans never really used it. But it became a kind of symbol of state authority over incarnation, which the Chinese have eagerly adopted. And because the Dalai Lama was worried that the wrong name might come out of the Golden Urn, he then made the announcement, at which point there was a furious reaction. The child and his entire family were detained and have never been seen again. And another ceremony was enforced to choose another child.
It's quite extraordinary.
And we will see a bit of a rerun. So it's quite likely that the exiled Tibetans will choose a child in exile, and certainly the Chinese will insist on one at home. So we will have, in effect, 2 Dalai Lamas.
Which is going to split all sorts. I mean, so complicated. So your book clearly needs to come out again, right?
I think it does, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. If only an authoritative figure would recommend it.
Yes, perhaps. I'm sure we have lots of listeners who are going to clamour for that. But, I mean, I presume you can get a second-hand one.
Yes, you can, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's widely available.
Yeah. I just before we close, I see that the Dalai Lama today, who was speaking during a ceremony organised by his followers to offer prayers for his long life ahead of his 90th birthday tomorrow, says that he intends to live to 130.
Well, and I'm sure we all wish him the very best in that endeavour.
Absolutely. Isabel Hilton, thank you very much indeed. That's all for Monocle on Saturday. Thanks also to our producers, Mariella Bevan and Desiree Bandley, and our studio engineer, Elliot Greenfield. Jenny Niven, Francesca Beauman, and as of course I said, Isabel Hilton. Monocle on Saturday will return at the same time next weekend. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thanks for listening.